Ever since the news about Disney and Sony failing to come to an agreement about Spider-Man came out last month, there's been a lot of name-calling and maligning thrown at both companies. Whether it's Sony being overprotective of Spider-Man, or Disney for just wanting more money from Spider-Man. Regardless of who's to blame for that though, the situation it's reawakened the talking point that Disney is a monopoly, and that it's trying to bully Sony into giving it more money from Spider-Man. Well, putting that controversy away for a second, this talking point it's really been alive for quite a while. Ever since Disney bought Marvel, I'd say. And it only intensified after they bought Lucasfilm, and then it really got popular after they bought Fox this year. Or even before that, really. Right when they announced the acquisition, I'd say. And it's just kept building and building this narrative that Disney is a monopoly, eating up Hollywood from the inside out. And it's really irksome to me that this is now the mainstream narrative, when in reality, it's a huge misconception. It's the farthest thing from the truth. And in fact, the opposite is true. Disney is not big enough. Yeah, it's quite the hot take, but I'll get back to that later. For now, I'll just say this. Disney is not a monopoly. It has never been one, and it will never be one. A monopoly is when a single company, controls most market share of a single industry. Keyword being one company. How can Disney be a monopoly if Warner Bros. And Universal Studios and even Sony Pictures are still a thing? It makes absolutely no sense. That should be the first obstacle to calling it a monopoly. But even outside of films, Disney is not the only broadcast network. They own ABC, but that's it. They are not the only theme park business. Universal has their own. You have Knott's Berry Farm, literally 10 minutes away from Disneyland. There's SeaWorld, Legoland. There's a lot of competition in that space. No matter which industry you're talking about, Disney is not the only competition around. Even in what seems to be the main target of these detractors, the box office part, they like to say that Disney is the box office right now. And it's true that it's the most successful one. In 2019, so far, they have 5 movies that grossed over $1 billion. And they just released the highest grossing movie of all time. So they have a point that Disney's dominating it. And it's dominating it even more with Fox. But even with Fox, it barely has a 40% market share. Only 40% at max. And if you look at Disney's output this year, it's looking like the highest it can get. This could be peak Disney right here. So it's not going to go above 40%. And if it does, it won't go that far above it either. So where does that leave us then? Disney having 40% with Fox. Oh, and Fox was barely surviving as a studio even before the acquisition, by the way. In any case, that's not a monopoly. That's not even a half-opoly. But that's just the beginning. There's a lot of reasons people think Disney is a monopoly. And I'll be going through some right here and kind of debunking each and every one of them. Because I think this is a topic that's gone on far too long unimpeded, and it's taken over the mainstream narrative, which is never good. And it could use a spoonful of truth to help the misinformation go down, if you catch my umbrella. So let's get into this. So the first argument is that Disney is gobbling up Hollywood, almost like it's Pac-Man or something. Or make that Gus Goose. Might as well have Disney monopolize my references while they're at it. Of all the arguments, this one is the most outlandish. Disney only goes after companies that it thinks can add strategic long-term value to the brand. And even then, it still has to make sure that the owners agree. It can't buy companies willy-nilly. Disney did not perform corporate takeovers of Marvel or Lucasfilm. These were companies that saw the inherent value in selling to Disney, of all companies. Pixar was once adamantly against merging with Disney, but they eventually agreed, so none of it was forced. As a matter of fact, when George Lucas sold Lucasfilm, he specifically chose Disney because, well, they approached him about selling it, and because he knew they were the ones he could trust with keeping his legacy alive, with keeping Star Wars alive. So many of these companies, when they sold out to Disney, they did it for a good reason. The company is good with the franchises it holds. Just look at how the Avengers are household names now. So the company really cares and puts a lot of thought into these acquisitions. It's not just throwing around money. You could say that about Fox if you're uninformed, but on closer look you'll see that the Murdoch family was going to sell Fox anyway. They wanted to just keep Fox News and sports. It was going to be for sale, and as we all know, Disney and Comcast fought for it. But Rupert Murdoch preferred Disney to buy it. It was downhill anyway, and again, Disney is the company that can be trusted to preserve and continue famous franchises. Disney can't buy any company that it wants. If that was true, it would have bought a lot more content than it already does. Maybe Sesame Street to go along with their Muppets, for example. Or how about the movie rights to Spider-Man? An all-powerful monopoly should be able to do something as simple as that, but they can't. They're not invincible. Next up is the argument that Disney somehow hurts competition, or they squander competition, or any other variation of that argument. What they're really getting at is that the US Justice Department should break up Disney, because it's gotten too unfair. Here's the thing. Let's say Disney was a monopoly. Alright, in this fantasy world, Disney is a monopoly in Hollywood. That wouldn't make them bad in itself. Alright, a monopoly does not mean bad. A monopoly itself is just a company that has most of the market share. All of it, really. It's only a bad thing when it starts to use its position to actually hurt and stifle competition. But Disney doesn't do any of that. Far from it, actually. Disney doesn't prevent people from watching other movies, or people from making those movies. You're totally free to go and see Joker next month, and Warner Brothers is totally free to make Joker. You don't have to watch a Disney movie in the theater. You're totally free to choose something else if you don't like Disney's output. Same with the theme parks. If you don't like Disneyland or Walt Disney World, then go to Knott's Berry Farm or Universal Studios. You have the choice there. If Disney was really a monopoly, why did they even allow a Knott's Berry Farm to exist, for example? 10 minutes from Disneyland, I might add. Or Universal Studios, which is actually their biggest theme park competition. Speaking of which, why did Disney let Universal build theme parks right beside their Florida and California locations? A simple reason is that they're not a monopoly. They can't prevent competition. Entertainment itself, the whole industry, whether it be theme parks or movies or TV, it's the least vulnerable industry to a monopoly. Because you are literally choosing what to watch, what to visit, what to play. If anything, entertainment is an oligopoly, which means that there are several sellers of the services and products. And oligopolies are very competitive, which is good for us, the consumers. When Disney bought Fox, the Justice Department only told Disney that it had to sell Fox's sports channels. Aside from that, it was a totally fair purchase, because the Justice Department knew that Disney isn't breaking any law. It's not hurting competition with this purchase. And Disney itself, it has competition. Don't you worry about that. It's actually just now entering the very crowded streaming market. And we all know how many companies want to get in on that streaming game. The US Justice Department only acts when it believes companies are treating their competition unfairly. like it did with Belle in the 80s, and like it did with Microsoft in 2000, I think it was. Those were fair cases, but Disney is not. It's not a monopoly, it's just a very big company. But is Disney really that big, though? Sure, it's big if you compare it, for example, with Warner Bros. Or maybe Universal at first glance. It owns a lot of the things that we saw as kids, and we still do today. It owns Marvel, Star Wars, Toy Story, not to mention all the core Disney stuff too, like Frozen, Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh, the list goes on. So I can see people's reasoning behind saying that Disney owns everything, and they're too big. But it turns into a pretty ridiculous criticism if you look at the competition Disney is dealing with right now. The first thing is, Disney's competition includes Warner Brothers and NBC Universal. And both these companies, they're way bigger than you think. Warner Brothers is a division of Time Warner, which itself is a division of AT&T, aka one of America's biggest companies and one of the world's biggest companies. AT&T, which owns Time Warner, is absolutely massive. It dwarfs Disney. It owns CNN, it owns Cartoon Network, Warner Brothers in full, DC Universe, Harry Potter, the list goes on. It owns a lot. So next to Disney, it has just as much of your beloved IPs. And Universal is no slouch either. NBC Universal is owned by Comcast, aka one of America's biggest companies. And it has an absolutely massive brand list as well. They got the whole NBC brand down there. They got DreamWorks. They got Illumination, for example. You can see it all here. Universal Studios itself owns so many IP. Jurassic Park, Fast and Furious. They own Incredible Me, E.T., Shrek, as of recently. This is a huge company in itself. So yeah, you compare Disney to Warner Brothers and Universal, it seems like Disney stomps them. But that's not what's happening at all. Disney is just that much better at using its franchises and marketing its movies. It does a better job than either of those two studios, which, again, I'll mention, are owned by massive communications giants. Even Paramount, the weakest of the major film studios, are owned by Viacom, one of America's biggest mass media companies. Viacom owns SpongeBob and Nickelodeon in general. They own hits like Star Trek, Mission Impossible, MTV. Viacom itself, which again owns Paramount, is about to get purchased by CBS, which will create another mega company for Disney to worry about. So you can see that the major studios, they have backup, whereas Disney, it's still purely in entertainment. Buying Fox, buying Lucasfilm, those purchases help it stand its ground against these multimedia giants. And the thing is, it's not just Disney that's worried. Even with the backing of these huge communications giants, there's still the incoming invasion of the tech companies. For all the whining about Disney being too big, it doesn't take into account the size of Disney's competition in traditional media, which I just went over. But it also doesn't take into account Disney's tech competition, which are companies like Netflix, Amazon, and as of November 2019, Apple. And if you think Disney's big, then you should take a look at the market cap of these companies. They dwarf both Disney and AT&T and Comcast. People like to complain about the consolidation of media, but media isn't just the New York Times and ABC anymore. It's internet, and internet is now in the hands of Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, these are the new giants to worry about. I don't blame Time Warner for being bought by AT&T. It was necessary to compete. Just like Universal got bought by Comcast, and Disney just bought Fox to improve their library. These are measures taken to improve their standing against these huge tech giants. That's also why the US Justice Department didn't block the Fox purchase. It knows that there's more competition coming into the media space. That's why I think Disney isn't doing enough. They have Fox right now, and they're taking a good step by launching Disney Plus. But even with that, the other companies still have the backing of huge conglomerates, or are tech companies. A company with enough cash, not assets mind you, cash on hand, to buy Disney and Sony outright is entering the streaming wars at the same time Disney is. So it's really mind-numbing to hear people call Disney too big and call it monopolizing the movie business, when in reality, it's really in a weak position, relative to everyone else, of course. Don't get me wrong though, it's still punching way above its weight. A company like Disney, almost 100 years old, does not survive and grow like it has by taking shortcuts. There are no shenanigans being pulled here. A big company is big because it's successful, not the other way around. Disney makes movies that people want to see. They make channels that people want to watch. They make theme parks that people want to visit. And people freely choose to give them their money. Calling it a monopoly just because some of your childhood media properties are owned by them is unfair. Disney's doing a better job with these companies than other competitors would have. And hopefully it'll continue to do a good job. Disney Plus is being called an unnecessary competitor to Netflix, and that last one really poisons my apple. Why would Disney keep its content on Netflix and not take advantage of its content to build itself a massive streaming platform of its own? Box office receipts are declining anyways, largely thanks to Netflix. So why not take advantage of the fact and build something up for yourself? This is the company that was the first to take advantage of television in the 50s, and the first company to launch a theme park. So it being the first major entertainment company to go out on its own with this streaming service is not surprising in the least, and that's why I know it'll be a huge success. People calling it a monopoly, even after seeing a video like this, they're lost causes. They're just gonna keep hating companies like Disney because they're big and successful. At the end of the day, people will always call Disney a monopoly, or unfair, or too big, or any other ridiculous sentiment. Because people hate success. People do hate success. Disney is being successful, it's getting people what they want, it's creating new things, and it's releasing new properties. Well, I guess you can't please everyone. Oh well. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this kinda pseudo rant. See, I'm on a mission to create the most comprehensive Disney YouTube channel, and fighting this kind of misinformation about the company is a major part of that. If you liked what you saw, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more Disney videos. Well, that's all I have for now. See you later.